a long time. We probably will only use a snippet, and we'll give you a copy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know about the
Persecution.
Oh, I thought it said persecution.
That's why I said about her house.
I can't read it. Persecution. Did you know about the persecution of Jews before Kristallnacht?
What? Before what?
Kristallnacht?
Crystal night. Not much. At that time, a crystal night I was just a very small child. Because crystal night, I was in the early 30s. And we did not know much about it until 1933. I remember that the Reichstag building somewhere in Berlin was burned down, and they accused a Dutchman of it. And they say probably it wasn't even him, but the name was Van der Lubbe. I remember that. I was 10 years old, and Dad read that story in the papers that now something is coming. We better watch out, and we can't do much about it. Until 1940, when Hitler's troops were out, and they noticed given to Holland, walked into Holland. Already they walked before in that into Poland and in Austria and those things. And then it really started for us. But at that crystal night, I did not know much about the Jews.
Did you know about the Kinder transport?
No. Heard by way of most of it.
See, there was no open communication in those years.
No, because my father explained how when they were on the train, they got on the train and they'd been persecuted for a long time, and they didn't really know whether the train would go anywhere. And they got to the border with Holland, and it's terrible in midwinter because I remember doing it. Okay, next question.
When did you know about the person of... I
Persecution?
know.
Well, you can...
That's hard work to say.
No, you can't read my writing.
No, I can't. When did you know about the persecution of Jews in Holland?
I would say about 1941, because I was working in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam had a lot of Jews. Where we lived in the top of Holland, Friesland, so there were some Jews, but I think in my hometown there wasn't even one. But then I started to know about it because that's when it came out and they had to put that yellow star on. And it's a story in that book too about that. And we did not know. And it dawned on us just this week when you read it again, that the Jewish people, when they got the star, they had to pay 4 cents for each star they had to wear. And that meant they could not go in restaurants, they could not go on public transportation because it said Jew. And you could not do it. That was the first awareness about the persecution of the Jews.
And see, did you have a special name in there?
A little bit earlier maybe, when the war started with Holland, which was just for 5 days, and Holland had to quit. They overwhelming. The German was so big and all the soldiers that Holland couldn't keep fighting. But they bombed the city of Rotterdam almost level. And then Holland had to give up because they lost too many just regular people. And I was in Amsterdam, and my barber was a Jew. He killed himself and his family. Right away, when Germany walked into Holland that first day on May the 15th, 16th, then it was over. And my dentist in Amsterdam was a Jew, Mr. Kroon. And the barber's name was Groen, they say in Dutch. And I remember, so then I already know that there was something common for those poor Jews. And they did, the dentist who killed his whole family, opened the gap. Right then and there already, they did not want to face this persecution and picked up by train and little things, especially in the south of Amsterdam, where I had a room. I had just a room, no board, because I was a cook. I had food, and that's when I started to notice. Even then, they started already picking up people, dragging them from the homes that they knew they were Jews, and even little girls, littler than you, 11 years old. And I saw one standing under a drop of water, and it was cold water just coming out. As long as he could stand, and finally she collapsed. in that neighborhood where I was living. It happened.
Only 17 years old.
I was 17, 18 years old.
When your family saved this Jewish person, what made them choose to save her, and
Well,
what did they do for it?
When we heard about it in this little hotel where I was working, there was a father there with 2 children, Betty Presser and her little brother, I forgot his name, Joop, I think they said. And then the kids in that where I was working, I came out of Amsterdam and went back to my parents' house because not as much with the German soldiers in Friesland than it was in Amsterdam. But then and I was involved in that, and that little girl and her brother and Mr. Presser had to have an interview with the head honcho of the cops, and they came to restaurant De Weinberg and Bonnema, my boss, and talked about it, and they said, these 3 people here, the children of the high school, because the kids played outside, they didn't go to school, why not? Why didn't they go to school? You know, they were 12, 13 years old and 9 years old. And then he said, yeah, and the kids called their father not father, but uncle. And under a way different name too, not Presser. I forgot the name, but anyway, part of it is in there too. And then we had to take some action and said, well, okay, I can ask my mom and dad if we can take care of one of them. And then I looked a little farther, and maybe the boy I can bring somewhere else, and the father I can bring somewhere else. The mother was already somewhere. And that's when it happened. That the little girl, who was Betty at that time, 12, 13 years old, came to my family. And we hardly had no room for it because we had already 2 young men hiding from the Germans, and I was hiding from the Germans. And my brother was about that age, that 17, that they also could get him, because in the meantime I was maybe 19, 20. With Henk van Olfen and Bardonia, they also came out of Amsterdam because they know me in Amsterdam, and they had to hide, and my mom and dad took them in. Just as bad as a Jew, because they were, you know, and that's the way it was. Then Betty came to us and it slept for 2 weeks maybe, and then we would find another place. But we didn't find another place for Betty. I couldn't find another place, my dad couldn't find another place. So Betty stayed, and she stayed the remaining of the war until she was about 15, and the war was over. And then Betty could go home, her parents were safe, both, but Betty didn't want to go home, she wanted to stay with us. In the meantime, she talked the Dutch, the Frisian language, which is different than Dutch in the province of Friesland. And she learned how to knit, she learned how to do this, and she didn't do a thing. She was brought up kind of lazy, you know, because the Jews usually had money, they had a maid for this, they had a maid for that. And us living in the poor country, my daddy barely made a living with 7 milking cows and doing some side work. But anyway, that's the way we went through it.
What were you hiding from?
The AIDS. My AIDS, everybody who was above 17, they could pick up and put you on transport and go to Germany and work in their factories. And the factories got bombed at night, you didn't want to be there. My neighbor boy hit a wine garden, he went there, he never came back, he got bombed. And I know a few other people. You could not put your feet on the street, or a German soldier or even a collaborator with the Germans, they would pot you and they come and get you. No questions asked, they throw you away in their cars. And then they had a train full, and you would put the transport in, there you go. And Grace had the same thing, and she had brothers like that. And her dad also was a young fella under 45. And at one time too, they picked him up, put him in jail. My dad never.
My dad looked like a Jew.
Yeah.
My dad was dark-haired, and he had a big beard like a lot of the older Jewish men have. And they just insisted he was a Jew with a false identity card. And it wasn't true, but they wouldn't believe him. So on a morning when they had a rally, and they raked up a few hundred of those people. They put them all in a big place, like a marketplace. And one by one, they were transported to a jail or to somewhere else. But he stayed in the prison, in the city where we lived. We lived in a rather big city.
Different town than what I live in.
And finally, I got to get him out through a lot of promises and things that I wasn't gonna do anyway, but.
German found a German a date
So that's.
to get her dad out of prison. Yeah.
And so that's how it went, and then he came home, and then we all had to disappear.
Then you had to disappear because they came after you again.
Yeah.
You could not stay in your own
So
home, whoever
when
was
you,
living.
when you disappeared, where did you go?
Well, we went to different families in the neighborhood, and we went to uncles and aunts that lived higher up in the north again, but just to get there was dangerous because there were inspections all over the road. So every little town that was on your way, there were Germans standing there and stopping you and saying, "Hey, who are you? Where are you going?" And if you had a bicycle, they might take your bicycle.
They took everything. They took the blankets
It
off
was
your dad.
terrible. The last couple of years was just awful. Yeah. But, we
And
survived.
here you've been in the prime of your life and you couldn't do a thing. You couldn't even go out and date a girl. Couldn't. But then on Sunday afternoon sometime, because my dad had a little farm, and the barns were clean, the cows were in the meadows and so on, and we had a little band at home. I had a drum, my brother played accordion. We had him in a little barn, and then the girls came to us, instead of us going to girls. There was sometimes 6 or 8 of them, and we just hoped that nobody would hear or collaborate with the Germans, say, hey, there's a whole group of people there. You took a chance, and still that Jewish girl was in there too,
And that Jewish girl you adopted as your own child. You pretended she
At
was
that
your
time,
daughter.
yeah, she had learned the Frisian language.
And she didn't look very Jewish.
She didn't look very Jewish.
She had red hair. Natural red hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of teasing with her too, because there she was with, with 5, 6 boys, and it was only Betty and I had a little sister, Boy, she took a lot of loving, I tell you.
So lovely. We still go see her when we're in Holland.
Oh, yeah.
She comes to us with her family. Her
Yeah,
husband
yeah.
passed away and he died.
Mhm.
Yeah, really.
For as
It
long,
always stayed family.
yeah,
Yeah, you hear that.
as long as my mother was alive, every birthday she came. She lived in a way apart from Holland, close to that hook from Holland you're talking about, in that part. And you had to go maybe, at least by car, 2 or 3 hour drive before. But they came every year. Yeah. And then the first, thankfulness too, they did something like people do here, and you appreciate it. Well, they take you out for dinner. And she did too, the whole group, when we were there too, my mother was honored to come to Amsterdam to get that big medal thing, then too, the whole family was there, and she took us all out for dinner again. Betty,
It's very interesting.
it's kind of interesting. Have you
We
done through that?
will look through it. We will do.
Okay.
We wanted to.
Well, yeah, you can keep it here for a little bit and then give it back to
Is
Frida,
there- Is there anything else you want to tell us about? Because it's interesting thinking about how, in a way, of course, you should use the word encounter. What you could do, Katie, is ask them if they could use the word encounters, as in what were their encounters with the Germans or the Jews in the Second World War. If we can use encounter, it would be a useful word. It's one of the words in the title, and if you put it back in,
Yes.
everybody
That's
loves
very
you.
important, yeah.
Yes, it sounds
Keywords.
weird.
Where did that has
What do you think we could put?
I don't know.
What were your encounters?
Well, you more or less got that covered already. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, but if we ask it again,
just her voiceover going to
But
have to
she
use
could
that.
say it.
Yeah.
you can say it, and we can
Well, it doesn't
at
have to be
least
done now.
use that. But we could ask them to use the word encounter. What would you use the word encounter with? With what your encounters were with the Germans, or even
Terrible stories coming from Poland and all through the underground.
They had relatives there.
That they had, and it was passed on to them through several channels that what was going to happen and what happened over there was terrible. And so they were also scared.
They knew what was coming.
A lot of Jews could kill themselves first.
practically better than being killed, to be honest.
And it really didn't get bad until after the first year on
All
that.
right.
Yeah. I think when Hitler felt that he wasn't going to win anyway, then anything goes.
So, is it possible that you could give me something about, like, when did you first encounter the Jews' fear of the
anti-Semitism. Well, if we put the word encounter in,
But can't we just like change the question?
I did it already in 1941, like I told you, when
Yeah.
they had to wear those stars. And there too, they couldn't go on public transportation. Then what us people did, who were not Jews, we said, okay, if they cannot go on public transportation like the streetcars, which was in Amsterdam, a must almost, or you had a bicycle because there were very little cars, then we are not going to go on the streetcars. So we boycotted it, you know, and yeah, a few people went on because streetcars were running. But that was one of the first encounters. This was in 1941 already, 1 year after they invaded us. That you think that this is serious business against those Jews. Where is it? They couldn't go in restaurants anymore or nothing. And if we went into restaurants too, you always have to bring your own knife, fork, because that silverware got stolen, or the Germans took it all, and they melted it and made guns out of it, or bullets, or whatever. We had to bring all the copper and gold, what we had, to certain spots in the town. They just said, you gotta come, you bring your radio. You couldn't listen to radio to the BBC anymore. All those things were restricted. They were the king of Holland. And you had to listen to them. And some people did and some people don't. And that's why you had improvised things too. We had no black coal so what you do, you had some coal dust and you get some clay out of the river and had a clay there and put some black coal into it, and then you had a clay ball with dust in it that burned. And you had a little bit of heat. You ate you ate sugar beets. You ate the leaves of the sugar beets because there was nothing else. I had to stand 5 hours in line in Amsterdam, already in 1941, then already. For the lady, I had a room, Mrs. Van Alphen, and she was not good on her feet, you know what I'm saying? And I stood in line 5 hours for a quart of milk. That long. And for potatoes. In Amsterdam, not in the country either. That's why a lot of people came to the province where Grace and I lived, and they took their bed sheets of their beds or the gold wedding ring and gave it to farmers for food. You need food. You don't need a ring. You don't need bed sheets in here. You can sleep on a mattress. And then they got, say, maybe 100 pounds of potatoes. They had a little pushcart with it. They went over the big dike. There's a big dike between Holland and North Holland and Friesland. I think 28 miles or something like that. And then they were back in North Holland towards Amsterdam, and it took them maybe 2-3 days at least to walk. And then they were almost in Amsterdam, and then the Germans took it away from them. They still had nothing. Can you imagine that? You do all this, you gave that for your family, you get out and do that. Older men, because if you were in that age group, you couldn't go up to 45. You had to be over 50, then they'll leave you alone. Oh, that's the eating. They could, hey, give me that bike, we need it. If they didn't need a bike, they took the tires off it, we need it. Horrible. But you had also some Germans who were, one example I have is that we, on that particular Sunday afternoon, like I told you, we had some insert, we had played and we sang, not in the barn, but in the living room. And we were there with all the guys, and the Jewish girl, my mom and dad. And I do not remember to play the piano. We had a piano in the house and he had the accordion. And Germans passed by on their bicycles. We had 14 in my hometown, of a town of 4,000. And then they stopped. I said, oh God, it's not going to dance it up. But the Jewish girl, we had a hiding place in the house. She went in there. And she stayed there, Betty stayed there. And we let them in and they came and they took their thing off and said, Mom gave them the chair, whatever was left of the chair. And the first thing they did, put the tobacco out. They had tobacco, we didn't. And we could roll a cigarette from their tobacco. And then they asked for a certain song about their Heimat. Their Heimat is their fatherland, you know. And the one German guy started crying. He said, no. Every night you heard a zoom, zoom, zoom. The planes from England went over and bombed in Germany, over her town, over my town, whatever. And then he said, no, last night when they were doing it, I have no knowing if my family is still alive. They might be bombed, you know. And there was the only guy of the 14 who were in my hometown when they had to escape, the war was over and we knew that already, and the Canadians would come. We got liberated by the Canadians, not the Americans. But this guy stayed behind, and I brought him as a farmer way out in the country, and then the Canadians later on came and picked him up, and maybe he was not dealt with as harsh as the other ones. But it was the only good one, and there was a guy who was crying him out. So you had those types in there too, but they couldn't do a thing. What can you do? But it's an experience you never forget.
But you never relive it.
We went out sometimes on the rowboat at night. When this one guy told me, because I was working in that underground system a little bit, tonight they're going to go house to house, so warn your buddies that we're coming. 8 o'clock, after 8 o'clock, nobody could go on the street anymore. Everything was closed. I don't know how it was. Hardly no light. You had all black things for the window, because the little light you had, because we hardly had no light. And then we went out sometime. My dad had a little rowboat with the Jewish girl, and put some blankets around it, or a kind of a thick thing which we lay in on the top of a cow in the winter, you know. And we took that along, a little bit of food we had, and we stayed in the middle of the lake at night. And then the next morning we went to one of the farmers close by and said, give word to my mom and dad that we are okay, because we couldn't go home. We stayed out another night. Those things has happened. And lucky, thank God, we got through. We were so full of joy that you can't imagine when the Canadians came into town, any time. But also some terrible things happened. They were coming. In her town, it was liberated. And down the road, maybe half an hour farther, was a town called Dronne. And there too, people said, celebrate already, and the Dutch flag out, and the orange out, and so on. And then the Germans picked up 15 guys and put them against the dike and shot. 1/2 a day before liberation, they were still occupied. What you mean? Fight.
They were going to lose, so they didn't care.
3 brothers were in there by the name of DeBoer. And the one DeBoer survived because he played dead, but he wasn't dead. The other got killed. There's a monument right there at that dike for all those guys. Maybe 12 hours before liberation, can you imagine?
What was the date?
What's that?
What was the date of the about?
I think it was the 14th or 15th of April 1945, because we got liberated on the 16th, a day later. You know, Canadians too, they could move, but hey, a section here, a section there. And it had to be occupied too. We had to rake up the Germans, and so then day by day. But this guy, they knew it was coming, because they were in the capital of Friesland. We have provinces, like we have states, and has capital. And she lived in the capital. We lived a little farther. And it took another day at that little town where those 13 guys got shot. It took another day where I lived and so on. So, but they celebrate now the liberation of Holland every year on the 5th of May. And people, they have silences walking to the graveyard. Also in my hometown there is a graveyard, and in that graveyard in a special section there's 10 English pilots are buried there because they got shot down over Holland, close to my neighborhood. And we rescued the guys more or less. Some of them stayed alive one day, some of them got shot and wounded, and some of them not, some of them got picked up. And some of them, the duration of the war, they were in hiding like we were. But there's a lot of history there.
When the Germans came to your get-together at your house,
They must have known that you were the wrong age to stay put.
Yeah, they know, but this one guy in there had a little influence, I think, over the other soldiers. They probably both kept their mouth shut. We gave him a cup of tea, whatever my mother made tea from, I don't know anymore, you know. Maybe from the leaves of sugar beets, I don't know, but anyway. Yeah, a little.
how did you manage to feed Betty when she wasn't your own?
Well, the other guys too, we had to feed them too, and they had no coupons, you know. Everybody got, for 2 months, every family got ration coupons. But what we did, and what was a privilege, that we had a little farm. And besides the milking cows, my dad had raised 1 or 2 pigs and a couple of sheep. And Dad and another fellow, his name was Volkert, he was a cousin, Well, he married a cousin of mine. We killed a pig and we killed the other mother's sheep. And then half of it was for ourselves. But the other half, what name is that?
Barter, traded.
Traded with the guy who had potatoes. And he got 5 pounds of meat and we got maybe 20 pounds of potatoes. We needed some black coal for heat. What we did, 5 pounds of meat, can we have half a sack of black coal? And this way we stayed alive with all those people in my house. With other things, with the milk, we made our own butter. Before we had the milk to the creamery in Germany, around the creameries too, we scooped the cream off it and made our own butter, right? Just shaking it and at her
That
house.
was a game, We sit 5 or 6 people around the table and we'd have a jar and go, 100 times. Okay, now you 100
The
times.
cream becomes butter and then
Until
after that there's your buttermilk.
it was butter.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Were you frightened? I mean, did you, because you knew the dangers of hiding a Jewish girl, were you frightened?
You're scared.
Oh
Were
yeah,
you
once in
scared?
a while, yeah. That's right, once in a while you were scared. Not a lot of times.
No, you just
No.
know hey, you're not going to win. You have a feeling, well, whether I get through this or not, we have to do this for our own people. We have to save everybody from these Germans, and the ones that could, and then the ones that had an opportunity to do different things, you did it. You just did it. You just figured, well, okay, sometimes they would catch you, and sometimes they would, you were full of stories. Oh, everybody had a story. Sure, they caught me once with some packages that I picked up in the harbor where the freight boats came. My uncle and aunt lived in another town in Dockham, and they had a grocery store, and so they would send us once in a while packages. And I would go there on the bicycle and pick up these packages. Then I was on the way home, and there was German men inspecting all these people that came by these boats, because they knew there was something going on.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't crazy. What do you have there? Well, I don't know what I have there. This is a package that came from my aunt for my mother who was sick. See, that was my story. And, oh, okay, well, why is she sick? Why does she need this stuff? There probably was tea in there, maybe sugar or butter. You could do without sugar, that wasn't the problem. Tea and coffee, and sometimes some oatmeal or stuff like that you could really, that was filling stuff. And so, well, my mother is sick, she needs that. And then they look you up and down, and you have to say, show your ID and all that. And, well, I was lucky, they let me go. But other people, they just take it away from them.
And men were not on the street,
No.
like I told you, because
No, men.
it was not safe. Between 17 and 45, you never showed your face on the street. You couldn't. So that's why we did even the underground work after 8 o'clock at night, when everything was dark. You couldn't go on the street. Although I had false identifications in case you do get caught. But I was lucky I never got caught.
How did you get your false identification? How did
Through my brother, we looked a little bit alike, but he was 3.5 years young. So he fell under that age. Although he was maybe 16, but I was 19 and a half, and I fell in there, but then I took his false identification. And because I was a cook in Amsterdam, but then I became a farmer, and farmer usually had an exception. You did not have to go, because the farmer, they raised like the cows, they raised the grain, they raised this, and that. You were exempted from that. And that, because I still, sometimes, at a younger age, I was soccer coach for the teenagers. I was a little older, but I also played with them. And I went even to another town and played soccer. But at one time too, we played soccer in my hometown. And there the Germans came, not the 14 from another town, and they had the guns on top of and they raided where we were playing soccer. And they caught 3 guys. We got into the fields beyond the soccer field, was Bouwland, and then farmland, where they raised sugar beets and grain and so. And on our bellies, we went through there until we got out of range, and then we walked. There's a piece of beets there in my hometown, all the way through another town, but there about 11:30 at night, we were still not home. Me and another guy by the name of Johan, and then my uncle Albert. I think Frieda knows him a little bit, but he got out because he was about that age, and he got out and tried to find Henky, it was me. And then we finally showed up after midnight in the dark, because there too we had to be very careful. Are there any Germans on the road? How are we going to escape from them? How are we going to avoid them? And then finally we came home. But it was a kind of a razzia on the soccer field. And they did it quite often in different towns all over. And some of them got shot, and some of them got killed, and some of them escaped. But that's a chance you took when you still said, ah, you love soccer. Okay, I'm going to play tonight. Yeah, sure. Almost fatal, you know. Yeah, and that's the way you live from day to day. And the last half year too, after my brother got picked up, he was also becoming of that age, you know. And he was put in a wagon, train wagon, sent to Germany to work in the factories. But he didn't like it, naturally enough, and he tried to find a way of escaping, and he did escape. But the two, just in the evenings, at nighttime, after dark or so on, he tried to walk home. But no transportation, no public transportation. But that too, quite often on his belly, and the front door, and saw a little light there. And then people help. And you just hope when you knock on the door that they're not collaborating with the Germans, that they're real good Dutch people, you know. And he made it that way, and it took him, I think, 4 days to get home. But when he came home, and also a neighbor boy, whose dad had this pig farm and delivered to the Germans, the pigs, he came home, and the two guys who were already from Amsterdam at my house, and the Jewish girl, we all had to have a hiding place with all of us. So the pig farmer said, okay, I have 2 cesspools, let's clean one out, and you guys are going to live in no collaboration with my dad in that cesspool. So we'll clean it out, that's stinking. Smoked it out with some open thread. Put all old newspapers on the walls, and the cesspool was as big maybe as this section of the room, from here to there. And there was a commode in there, so we could, you know, and a little bit of a piece of sow with a kind of a tarp in the order that the Jewish girl could to the bathroom too, you know. And we played cards all day, and my brother was a good drawer and things like that. But we got through it. We lived in there for 5 to 6 months in that cesspool. Hardly never saw daylight except there again at night after 8 o'clock. It sounds horrible, but you have to get through it. And other people did other things. They lived behind you have a stairway going upstairs, a kind of a falls room in there. When there was something going on, you went in there. We even had it in the hay at my dad's place. But we had to have some pipes through there because we had to have air in there. And the thing was way on the bottom. That's where we raised those pigs too, clandestine, and hide them from the Germans. It's quite a life experience, I tell you.
You came out alive.
Yeah. But from Anne Frank, those people came from another country and they lived in Holland. Also at that time when the people you know went to Holland, before actually World War II started, because they saw it coming. They were not the real Dutchmen.
Well,
Anne Frank,
right.
no?
No, they were Germans.
So true.
Amazing. All that hard.
Yep.
Thank you. I didn't actually realize, of course, that the men had to try
And the beer and the wine.
Yeah, and they got chocolate, and they got soap, and they got. But oh boy, after they were noticed after the liberation. They took a lot of these girls, especially in the big city where I live. They put them on the steps of the city hall, and they cut all their hair off.
Oh yeah. In
Right,
public.
right now it's in style, but
Yeah.
in those days it was a shame. They cut all their hair off, and they set them up there, and they said, this is so-and-so, and you did that, and so-and-so. They couldn't put them in jail, but they did. It was bad that they had to do that, but they had to get the hate out of themselves, you know, the men. They just had to do something. They had to get the hate out of it.
Well, it was such a terrible time for everybody.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But that too, I mean, you said too, some of them, they sympathized with the Germans, and even next door to us, although we had a Jewish girl, people by the name of Nine, their son was my age, a year older, but also qualified to go to Germany. But what he'd do, he became a chauffeur for the Dutch, for the Germans, hauling their stuff from point A to point B. And he had extra racing coupons and everything. But those people knew we had this Jewish girl, because this Jewish girl was in the back quite often. The farm was from here to the other side of the street, and she walked that. And then she had to do dishes or whatever. Betty was out there, but the people never told on us. And they were sympathizers with the Germans. And I got to give them credit for that. They did not tell.
It was their opinion that the Germans were right. And so it's almost like Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
You know, you respect each other's situation, but you don't fight about it. And that's the way it was in Holland too, for the people among themselves. But if it would be detrimental to themselves, then they would talk. They would tell on you. If they would started getting afraid of their lives, and if they were caught, or if, like Henk's parents would have been caught, they would have been shot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that happened to a lot of people that were hiding the Jews.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. And even us, my parents, they had Jewish furniture and other belongings in our attic. And at one time, the lady that owned the stuff, she came over and she said, I want a list of the stuff that's there. They weren't always nice, Jewish people. And she wanted the list because she wanted to know for sure that we're not going to use it or not going to give it away or sell it or whatever. And my dad said, I'm not going to do that. And you run around with this list and it's at Kramer's house. And he said, I'm not going to do that.
You have
If
to trust us.
Insist on that, and you don't, yeah, you have to trust us. And otherwise you'd better come and get us back. And that was still in the beginning when, you know, but they anticipated, the Jews anticipated always what was going to happen to them. They all knew somehow or other from, like I said, from underground connections or something. And we didn't in the beginning, I'll tell you the truth, we didn't even think it was so. We thought, they're just, you know, they're just being sorry for themselves, sort of like that. Honest to goodness. And there were people that said, you know, they can't be. And so what? So they're Jews, so they like to be, you know, sympathized with. But oh boy, it came out different. Yeah.
But you also had some in there, and they mentioned a little while ago, we had a Jewish lady in my hometown, brought by an old Dutch lady, a single lady, an old maid, and never married, Hiltje Skaap, and she was Roman Catholic. And the priest in my hometown here also was in the underground with us. And he brought that lady to this lady, Hiltje Skaap. That one evening, she gave a message to this priest that she wanted to see me. I was the youngest one in the bunch, and she wanted to make love to me. And if I don't do it with you, then somebody else did. And she had a newspaper there, and there was a little ad in there that some farmer whose wife died needed a housekeeper, and she wanted to go there. And I had to bring her there. I said, I have no way of transporting you there. It was close under her hometown. I think the town was called Weidem, if I remember. And I couldn't do that. She said, and if you don't do it, then I'm going to tell the Germans about all you guys, and they rolled you up. That was not a thankful Jewish lady.
No, you had some pretty bad ones.
Those things too. And you had to make a decision then and there. How shall I handle this? I went back to that priest and said, you're older than me. He was 37 years old and I was 20. He said, you handle this lady. Yeah. No, that was not nice, I tell you.
But not all, I mean, not all English people are nice, not all Dutch people are nice, not all Jews were going to be nice, whatever.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the way life is.
Yeah. Oh, now. Oh, sure. But
Or
at
even-
that time, you thought, lady, I'm risking my life to have you there. How can you be so demanding? You know? There was a...
Also, I'll tell you a story about, we talked about the racing coupons that we had to have in order to get so many loaves of bread and maybe 1 pound of sugar a month or whatever it is. We needed some ration coupons for those people who were in hiding who didn't have ration coupons, the Jews and the boys at my house, and there were thousands of boys around. Headquarters of those ration coupons was in my hometown, and with bicycles and a little cart behind the bicycle because there was no gasoline, no one. They had to go to the surrounding little towns like Hindelopen, and Stavern, and all those little towns, where they set up a little office, and the people from that town could come and get their monthly or 2 monthly ration coupons. Then we from the underground, we talked to the head guy there, said, now tomorrow morning when you go out between Workum and Hindelopen, that little town there, 6 kilometers, we are standing there and we're going to hit you on the head until you bleed, and we steal those ration coupons. And we did, because they had a way of getting new ones and we didn't. And we had to do it that way, and clobbered it.
And the man cooperated.
And the man cooperated.
You-
We were all, like,
Yeah.
yes. Another story, but it's a true thing. So we could survive with the other guys.
So there was about 50-50 Jewish people and men of age that,
Yeah, Holland people,
yeah, Holland people.
Like I had to hide too, and all the other, her brother.
Do you remember the anti-Semitic propaganda? Because, when the Germans came in, by the time they came to Holland, they'd really got that propaganda machine well going.
A year and a half already.
Yes, so they knew how to manipulate people. Do you remember all that anti-Semitic stuff? I mean, do you remember how they managed to try and turn you against the Jews?
I don't remember much of it. No, nothing.
Did you ever go to the cinema?
No, we didn't have a cinema in town.
Of course, and you couldn't.
So from the time that they invaded until the time you were liberated from it by the Canadians, about how long was that period of time?
5 years.
5 years. Long time to wait.
Especially when you're 17.
1940,
If you wanted to go, wasn't that
It's a long way to go.
I'm telling you.
The first couple of years, well, you could get by with a
Oh,
lot of
yeah,
stuff.
oh, yeah.
But toward the end, the Germans, they knew they weren't going to go any farther than those beaches there in France, and they felt knocked out. So when they felt they were getting scared and they had to turn back, then these people started getting mean, and they just did anything they pleased, those soldiers, and it wasn't very organized anymore in the end. No, they all just did what they pleased to get away with it, Yeah, it was a hard time for them too, for most of them, because they didn't know when they came home if their families were going to be there, or if their hometown was there, whatever. So it was hard on them. They were people too. They had feelings, but they had to do this. Otherwise, if they wouldn't go in their own army, they would have been killed too. Yeah. So,
Then you also probably heard stories about to get weapons to us so we could defend ourselves with the underground. How to do that? We had weapon droppings from the English airplanes, and we did, and then we found them, and then we had to hide them. And at the same time, they gave a lot of oil and fat, lard and those things, because we were hiding them in the canals, and so they would not get rusty. We put them all through the oil, the metal parts and so on, and then we put them a bunch together with some rope, and say 6 guns went down here, and 6 guns went down there, in the same canal. And as soon as we were liberated, we got them all out and cleaned those things up, because you never know what's coming next. Or sometimes we got 6 guns out before because we had a terrible thing to do. And think, well, we need some weapons to help us. At one time too, a train with ammunition from Stavoren to Leeuwarden got bombed by the English pilots, and it flew into flames just outside of my hometown. And it was bad for my hometown, because now they're going to do represaillemaatregelen.
they're going to take
Reprisal.
Action, yeah,
Reprisal.
right.
in my hometown, because that was happening there. And what they did, they tried to pick up some boys and put them in jail, they did. And we would try to get them out of jail. Yeah. So what our group does, this guy who was the head of this supporting group for Hitler, And Mussert was the high guy in Holland, was Rentje Haagsma. I didn't go, but I knew about it. They go out there in the middle of the night, and put gasoline on his farm and burn the whole thing down. Yes, they did.
Of course.
They did. And it was a bad thing to do, because is any more going to happen against us? Like in a little town of Putten, they killed one German soldier there, the people of the town, because he did something bad. I think he was, pardon my language, say, taking a leak, and they hit him, and they killed him. What they do, in that little town, there were living 56 men. They picked them all up. Can you imagine that?
It's still known at the
It's
town
still
of
known.
widows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those things you faced when you did something. Yeah.
Yeah, if you didn't take a chance. And I think we were so much younger. You know, there were things that you didn't even think about
No,
had to be done, and
You
you
did
did
it. You did it.
And it was a different feeling. When you think about it now, you think, oh, you know,
You did it for your country. I mean, it's not like, you don't do it for President Bush. We didn't do it for the Queen. We love the Queen, that isn't there. But, you know, self-perseverance too. And my country again. And that's why you do it. You feel for your country or you don't.
yeah. And for your,
And you don't always like to be centered. And I volunteered and I went to Indonesia to fight the Japanese, you know. And Grace almost went too because I was there. Her dad said, no. Things you do when you're young, right?
Or when you don't have children and a family, it's
Yeah.
different.
yeah. Our parents must have felt totally different when we were so bold, so to speak.
Yeah.
And do these things. But they never held us back.
No,
No, never did.
very supportive.
Yeah.
But we can tell about it, and a lot of them can't. A lot of them died. Unnecessary. Unnecessary. Same as in this country of Iraq, unnecessary. What Saddam Hussein did. And killed all those people. It's because you have a certain belief, you know. Yep.
When mankind gets out of control and the evil that was,
We just sit
the
and
evil
talk,
that
and
was
we
done.
don't know how we did it.
So if you take the book along,
Oh, we've-
and the English part especially, and if there is some questions yet, make some notes, and when we come down again or something,
please.
maybe we'll give you 5 minutes then.
Time. I'm sorry, it's just very interesting.